Did start recording, but it didn't do the recording in progress. A second.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Justine Brotherston. I'm the intern municipal clerk with the township. Tonight, I also have Laura Emery, our communications committee coordinator with us, and we have Sarah Peter, our deputy clerk. So welcome to the Heritage Designation Open House. Tonight, staff will be providing a presentation, and following, we will be available to speak directly to you if you have any questions regarding the designation process, or if you have specific questions about your statement of cultural heritage value or interest for your property. Before we begin tonight's presentation, I would first like to share the township's recognition statement with you. We recognize that when the first Euro-Canadian settlers arrived in what is now Uslinch Township, the Anishinaabe ancestors of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation had long established tent camps in the area. Through written and verbal accounts, we understand that Anishinaabe interacted with the settlers in a friendly and cooperative manner, and it is acknowledged that the development of the township encroached on their traditional way of life, resulting in their displacement. Perfect, so we'll just go over the agenda for tonight's presentation. So tonight, we'll provide some information on Bill 23 impacts to non-designated status. What is heritage designation and why is it important? The responsibility of property owners whose properties have designated status. Draft process for alteration and demolition to designated properties. Examples of alteration to designated properties and the 2024 designation process and next steps. So first we'll talk about the impacts of Bill 23 on non-designated status. Bill 23 has impacted a number of aspects of the Ontario Heritage Act, including the listing of properties with non-designated status on the Heritage Register. Any properties included on the Township's Heritage Register with non-designated status on January 1st, 2023 will be delisted from the register on January 1st, 2025, unless they are designated. Once a property has been removed from the Heritage Register, it cannot be re-added for 5 years. This has resulted in the loss of interim protection from demolition of culturally significant properties. It is very important to engage with property owners throughout the heritage designation process and ensure that there's an understanding of how designation does and does not impact properties. The township is not the only municipality going through this process. As a result of the changes from Bill 23, municipalities across Ontario are reviewing their heritage registers to try and preserve culturally significant buildings across the province. We'll go into heritage designation frequently asked questions. So why is heritage designation important? Heritage designation is an important tool to preserve our community's cultural and architectural heritage for future generations and to conserve identified heritage attributes of structures. Preserving these structures within our community makes it a unique and interesting place to live as well as to visit, which can encourage local tourism within the township. To quote from the Ministry of Culture's Strengthening Ontario Heritage, our heritage tells us who we are, where we come from, and what we have accomplished. Heritage is a source of strength and confidence that puts the changes of society into perspective and helps us to build a better future. So, is my property designated or non-designated? It's important to understand the current status of properties listed on the Township's Heritage Register. Currently, the Township has one designated property. Council at its meeting on March 20th of this year adopted heritage designation bylaws for 14 more properties. A notice of passing was sent to the affected property owners, and notice has been published in the Wellington Advertiser, and these notices are also posted on the Township's website. These bylaws will come into effect on May 7th if no appeals are filed. All other properties on the Township's Heritage Register have non-designated status currently. What does non-designated status mean? So non-designated status means that if a property is listed on the Township Heritage Register, it has interim protection from demolition and certain Planning Act applications. During this time, property owners are required to provide 60 days notice of their intention to demolish or remove a building or structure from their property. Properties with non-designated status have no restrictions on building permit applications. As previously stated, due to Bill 23, non-designated properties are now removed from the Heritage Register after a period of 2 years or on January 1st, 2025, if listed before January 1st, 2023, which is the case with all of the properties currently listed on the Township's Heritage Register. So what does it mean to have a designated property on the register? Properties designated with designated status are approved by council through a designation bylaw, which is then registered on title. When a property is designated, it protects the heritage features listed in the designation bylaw from demolition or alteration without first receiving approval through a heritage permit. What does heritage designation not impact? There are often misconceptions related to what heritage designation does and does not mean for a property. Heritage designation does not impact the zoning of a property, therefore all of the same zone uses and requirements are in effect. Heritage designation does not limit installation of modern features or impact the inside of a structure. Heritage designation does not require the property owner to restore any lost architectural elements. Most importantly, heritage designation does not prohibit alterations or redevelopment of designated properties. It just puts a process in place to protect alterations to the heritage attributes that are listed within the designation bylaw. How are properties designated under the Heritage Act? At a high level, the process to designate properties is as follows. First, a property is identified as a candidate for designation, and then the property is researched and evaluated for its cultural heritage, value, and significance. Once the research and evaluation has been completed, a report is brought to Township Council, at which Council may state an intention to designate, and then notice is given in accordance with Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a 30-day objection period in which anyone may object to the designation to Council. At the end of this period, and after considering any objections, Council can either withdraw its notice of intention to designate or can proceed with passing a bylaw to designate the property. If Council proceeds with designation, a copy of the bylaw and a notice of passing is given to the property owner, anyone who made an objection, and the Ontario Heritage Trust. There's then a 30-day appeal period, and if no appeals are received, the bylaw comes into force and effect following the last day of appeal. A copy of the bylaw is then registered on title and sent to the Ontario Heritage Trust. Responsibility of property owners who have properties that have designated status. So what are the responsibilities of a property owner with designated status? So when ownership changes on a designated property, the new owner must give notice to the clerk of the municipality within 30 days of becoming the owner. The property owners may not alter or renovate heritage attributes listed in the designation bylaw unless a permit has been issued by the Township Council. Property owners may not demolish or remove heritage attributes listed. I apologize. Property owners must maintain the identified heritage attributes as listed in the designation bylaw and in compliance with the Township's property standards bylaw. Heritage designation alteration requests. So what kind of requests or require approvals? So all alterations that are likely to impact the property's heritage attributes as described in the property bylaw. So we provide a few examples that may require renovation, such as the removing or alteration or replacement of original windows, doors, decorative elements, removing or altering the replacement of verandas, porches, etc., just to name a few. Staff have proposed a heritage permit bylaw for council's consideration, which will provide the framework for processing heritage permits. Staff are proposing 3 types of heritage permits for council's consideration in the heritage permit bylaw. The first is a heritage permit exemption waiver, which will provide a streamlined process for alterations, constructions, and demolition of buildings and structures on properties designated under Section 29 that will not impact the heritage attributes identified in the heritage designation bylaw. The next is a heritage permit, which will provide a clear process for approvals for alteration and construction of buildings and structures on properties designated under Section 29 that will impact a heritage attribute identified in the designation bylaw. And then the heritage demolition and removal permit will provide a clear process for approvals for demolition and removal of buildings and structures on properties designated under Section 29 that will impact heritage attributes identified in the designation bylaw. On the screen is a flow chart just demonstrating the process for a heritage permit exemption waiver. So the first step is that a permit application would be submitted to the municipal clerk. The municipal clerk would then review the application and serve notice once the application is deemed complete to the owner. The clerk would then have the ability to approve the heritage permit exemption waiver, and the owner would then be able to proceed or apply for additional permits as required. Alternatively, the municipal clerk could refuse the application, at which point the application would be referred to the Heritage Advisory Committee for comment and to council for decision. This slide depicts the process for both the heritage permit process and the heritage permit demolition or removal process. So there are a few more steps. With this one, the application is submitted to the municipal clerk. The permit is then brought to council to be deemed complete and for council to request any additional information that they may require. The municipal clerk would then serve notice of the complete application. Following that, the permit application would be reviewed by the Heritage Advisory Committee to provide comments to Township Council. Township Council would then consider the permit application and would have the opportunity to either approve the permit with no conditions, approve the permit with conditions, or refuse the permit. In the case that council approved the permit with or without conditions, the owner would then have the opportunity to proceed with their application and apply for additional permits as required. If council were to refuse the permit or approve the permit with conditions, the property owner would then have an opportunity to appeal that decision to the OLT, and the OLT would make the final decision regarding that application. So as I mentioned, this heritage permit bylaw is currently being reviewed. So council is seeking feedback with respect to the heritage permit process and bylaw. This engagement opportunity launched on April 4th and will run until May 3rd at noon. And this feedback will be included in the next draft of the bylaw to be reviewed by council. So heritage designation alteration examples. So one of the most prevalent concerns regarding heritage designation is the property owner's ability to make alterations on their property. The next three slides are examples of adaptive reuse, which demonstrates the ability to make changes to designated properties which can enhance the use of these properties. As previously discussed, the heritage permit process would be required for any proposed alterations to heritage features listed in the designation bylaw. So the first example that we have here is Delta Hotels by Marriott, the London Armories. So built in 1905, the London Armories was originally a headquarters for military units for the Canadian military. The armory was closed in 1976, and then in 1988, it was converted into a luxury hotel, and a 20-story tower was added in the center of the building. The next example we have is the St. Charles Market. So built in 1908, the 135 Barrett Street was originally a Roman Catholic church. The property became vacant in 2010 and was transformed into a marketplace and restaurant, which is wrapped in an 8-story housing complex. And then a little closer home, we have the Idea Exchange. So it was built between 1884 and 1887. So 12 Water Street South in Cambridge was originally a post office, which later became a custom home. It was designated a National Historic Site in 1983 and was converted to the Idea Exchange in 2018 when the exterior was restored and a new glass pavilion was added. In addition to the information, staff have also provided or are developing a heritage designation guide, which will be available for those who would like some more information. So where is the township in the 2024 heritage designation process? So council has identified 19 properties as candidates for designation in 2024. Circulation of the open house that you are attending tonight was sent out to the candidate properties. A circulation of site visit requests for 2024 candidate properties has also been sent out, and site visits of properties that have responded to the request have been completed. Current steps are that the Heritage Advisory Committee is reviewing and updating statements of heritage, cultural value, or interest, and we're holding an open house for the 2024 candidate properties. So what are our next steps? So next steps for 2024 heritage designation include the Heritage Advisory Committee approving the statements of cultural heritage value or interest for the 2024 properties at their May 6, 2024 meeting. Statements of heritage, cultural value, or interest will be sent to the township's peer reviewer for review. Staff will present a report to council recommending council state their intention to designate the 2024 candidate properties. This has been tentatively scheduled for the July 10th, 2024 council meeting. Following that meeting, a notice of intention to designate will be sent to property owners and the Ontario Heritage Trust, including the notice of objection period. Staff will then report to council regarding any objections received and recommend designation for properties for which an objection was not received. That's tentatively been scheduled for the August 28th, 2024 meeting. Notice of passing of the designation bylaw would then be sent to property owners and the Ontario Heritage Trust, including the notice of appeal. Staff will report regarding recommendations regarding designation for properties for which objections were received. And this has tentatively been scheduled for the November 6th, 2024 council meeting. And if council proceeds with adoption of the heritage designation bylaw, staff will then prepare and send a notice of passing of designation to the property owners and the Ontario Heritage Trust, including the notice of appeal period. So that concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. If you have any questions regarding your property, please feel free to come chat with Sarah, Laura, or I at the tables over here. Thank you, everyone.